All right, so I'm Matt Scholl, and for this movie presentation, I decided to do Perfect Blue. Now, we're going to start off with a little bit of a plot summary, and then we're going to dive into what I thought that this movie said about Japan and Asia. Now, to start off, the movie follows a pop star named Mima Kirigo as she's sort of transitions from being a pop idol actress to where, and while she's dealing with a really worsening mental health and a really intense case of stalking. Now, it's directed by Satoshi Kon and distributed by Rex Entertainment. And so this plot didn't really say anything about Asia at all. But what I really liked was the environments that we were in throughout the entire film. The background and like little nuances said a lot about Asia, in my opinion, in Japan. And that's what we'll really see in this scene that I'll show you guys. I really liked being able to pick up on the little nuances and what it had to say about the movie. Now, I thought the movie was fantastic. Initially, I didn't think I was going to be able to use it at all for this presentation because it was such a roller coaster. I had a hard time following the plot. And then the second time around I watched it, I thought it was fantastic. I really picked up the little nuances throughout everything, and I was having a great time. But to start out, we've got what this says about Japan. Now, all personal areas and apartments I noticed in here were super, super tiny. It was crazy how tiny the apartments were. And like Mima's apartment, we'll see that in the clip here. That was going to be incredibly small throughout the whole film. I'm sorry, my allergies are getting me this season. But and another thing we saw was no chairs. I didn't see any chairs in Mima's apartment at all. And for us, that'd be really crazy, right? But and when it's set in Japan during this time period, that's not really weird at all. That's something very common. And now this could be a little bit, this could say something about Japan. This could just be sort of what the director wanted to say about everything. There seemed to be an overall lack of materialism in the film. And this is exemplified by Nima when she's shopping in the grocery store. She says to herself that the only luxury she allows for herself to partake in is having cow milk, which I thought was kind of very interesting throughout everything. So, some of the phrases that I picked up. This was one of my favorite ones because it really showed an outside influence on the movie. There were two phrases that popped up a lot that I thought were interesting. It was the pits and part timer. And it was the pits, from my understanding, means it was trash, it was bad, it was terrible. And part timer means like almost you're not dedicated enough to be a part of something. At least that's what I sort of thought it was. And I thought this was really interesting because it might not say anything really about the movie itself or anything like that, but it shows an outside influence of culture in the movie. So I thought seeing that these guys that I've never heard of these before, so they would have to be a phrase that would be really popular during this period of time. Now, another thing that was really obvious in a lot of the Asian movies I've watched, a ton of food and drinks everywhere. When people meet, there's food, there's drinks, there's everything, there's all that type of stuff. Now, I really liked that because it really showed how important that is for Japanese culture or Asian culture in general, seeing that. Being able to watch these people together and watch them partake in a meal, like whenever Mima would meet with her managers or friends or anything like that, it really drove home the fact that when you are with friends, you have food, you have drinks, because that's what you do. And I thought that was super, super interesting. Now, another really common thing throughout Japanese culture we see in the film is most characters that are portrayed as more honorable and respectful, they tend to bow to their superiors when they apologize. We see this a lot when Mima is in her acting career and she's sort of messing up while acting. She apologizes to the actresses and actors that they're working with because she holds them to a really high regard. And that's something that I thought was pretty obvious throughout the entire film and really representative of Japanese culture. Another thing we get to really have fun with is the exposure to Japan at the cusp of the internet, basically. We get to see them drop in with computers and all this brand new stuff. And you'll see this actually in the scene that I'm about to show you guys. The scene's about Mima is getting a new computer and her friends helping set it up. And we sort of get to see the culture start to shift a little bit. We get to shift away from the olden times, and we get to get to be exposed to these online websites. And that's a really big part of this movie, actually, is there's a website that the stalker runs that is all about Mima's life. And you're sort of exposed to that new technology era of Japan. I thought that was really interesting. And another thing, I didn't write it on the slides, but we were really exposed to the Japanese cityscape throughout this whole movie. And I thought that was really cool seeing Tokyo like that and represented in an animated film. I thought it really showed the whole big city feel included with the small apartments. I thought it really drove home what it was like to stay in Tokyo and stuff like that. Another thing I thought was really, really interesting, and this is just another one of those things that if you weren't paying attention, you wouldn't pick it up. But if you saw it in the background, it would speak 1,000 words. There was a ton of coffee can vending machines in there. And I've never seen any of those in any Western things. We have normal vending machines, stuff like that. But I've never seen any coffee can ones in Western movies or anything like that. But in all the animated or the anime movies I've watched and Asian influenced ones, they're everywhere. And I thought that was super interesting to be able to see once again, like with the phrases, that outside culture bleeding into the background of the movie. And now I'm going to switch to this clip. Now, it does have dialogue, but no subtitles. I'm sorry, I couldn't find one with subtitles, but the dialogue isn't important in this scene. What I really want you guys to pay attention to is the background of everything, Mima's apartment, and just the things inside of it, because that's what, to me, really said a lot about Asia. And here, I'll click on that quick. But here in the next shot here, we'll get to see that really nice Tokyo cityscape, and with this combined with the small apartment, it'll really drive home just that the big city feel of Tokyo. And here we get to see like her apartment. There's no chairs, there's nothing. It's so tiny.
ねえ、ルミちゃん、どう思う？何が？この間のあれ。クレジットカードはと。やっぱり警察に届けた方が良かったんじゃない？
If you just look around her apartment, it's just everything feels so cramped, and that was a big theme throughout the film in all the personal areas.
そんな犯罪だよ。それにもしかしたら私が危なかったわけでしょ？大丈夫。ただのいたずらだってば。幸い田所さんの怪我も軽かったし、今はそんなこと気にしないの。それより今、説明するから聞いてね。
And here, I'll fast forward a bit here. For this last shot, what we've got here, this is a perfect shot of just how, and really encapsulate how tiny her apartment is here. And I really like this because it hammers home that idea of Japan being so tiny, or the apartments in Japan being so tiny, and Tokyo, everything just cramped together like that. But here, I'll pull back to the presentation here. Now, I don't have any more slides for you, but I still want to discuss a lot of stuff. Now, like I said, that scene, I'm sorry it was in Japanese and with no dialogue, but I really felt that, here, let me stop screen sharing here for a bit. If I can figure it out. Okay, there we go. All right, sorry about that. So what I really liked in that scene was it showed you the background of her life. And I thought that was really well put across how tiny everything was and how small things could be in Japan. Now, like I said, this movie, the plot didn't help at all, but it really exemplified Japanese culture throughout everything with the phrases, with the small apartments, with people bowing, with the food. That I felt was so strongly influenced by Japanese culture. It was fantastic. Now, there's a few more things I'd like to discuss. Now, I'm not really sure if they exemplify Japanese culture, but that's just something I picked up on throughout the film. I'd love to discuss it with you guys if you've seen this movie. Now, whenever Mima is performing in her pop group, there is no women in the audience. Every single member of the audience is a man. Now, I don't know if that was a director's choice or if that was directly influenced by Japanese culture, but I would love to discuss that with you guys if you've seen the movie because I'm very interested because throughout all my research I couldn't find anything about that. And there's one more thing I wanted to talk about here. Let me reference my notes. But actually, yeah. Well, actually, yeah. The lack of materialism. I know I spoke about that in the beginning here, but one thing I really wanted to think about more was if that was a director's choice or if that was just a movie's choice. Now, I really think that could be a little bit of both, honestly, because from the research I've done, I've noticed that Japan tends to be a little bit less more focused on the material than in Western culture. But at the same time, how discernible is that? I love to discuss that with you guys if you guys have watched this movie. But yeah, overall, that's pretty much going to conclude our my presentation here. But yeah, like I said, this movie was such a strong proponent for Japanese culture. I thought it was fantastic. But yeah, that'll be it. Thank you guys very much for watching the whole thing. That was very nice of you guys.